Good morning, guys. This morning we are going to be talking about one of my favorite things with reading literature, and that is figurative language. And we touched on this a little bit yesterday when we read Snow White Meets the Huntsman, because there's so much in it that it's kind of hard not to talk about it already. But this morning we're just going to focus on figurative language. So our goal will be that you'll be able to identify similes in a text, determine and explain the meanings of those similes, and then hopefully use those in your writing as you are creating your fairy tales. So figurative language includes many different kinds of language. There's similes, like she as busy as a bee, where they're comparing the girl to the bee, because we always know how bees are so busy. They're always buzzing around from flower to flower. They don't ever stop. Metaphors. He is a chicken, so it's where you're actually comparing somebody or something to another thing by saying they are that. When we know the boy is not a chicken, he's actually a boy. Idioms. I have butterflies in my stomach. So when you're using language where we know there's not butterflies in your stomach, but you use that to create that feeling of the busyness in your belly when you're nervous. Personification. The flowers begged for water. It's when we give something that's not a human, the word person is in there. We give them a person type trait. So we said the flowers are begging for water, knowing, excuse me, that flowers can't beg. Hyperboles. I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. So hyperboles are like an exaggeration where you're like, you're not that hungry. Or when you tell your parents, I'm starving, you're not starving. You might be very hungry, but you're not actually starving. Alliterations is the repetition of a beginning sound. Sally sells seashores. See, I can't even say it. Sally sells seashells by the seashores, and we often refer to those as tongue twisters. And then there's onomatopoeia, which is one of my other favorites because it's so fun to say. And that's when you say a word that actually, when you say it, it kind of sounds like the sound it makes, like splat. You know, you splat like putty or slime down and it goes poof, and almost sounds like it's saying splat. So today we're just going to focus on similes because it's too much to talk about all of these in one day. But just I wanted you to hear the different kinds because I think you'll recognize those. Some of them, like, oh yeah, I've heard that, or you may even be thinking of one that you use a lot. But similes are what we're going to focus on today. And in your notebook, I would like for you to write these two things down. So right now would be a really good time to pause the video and jot these notes in your notebook. I would like for you to write them on a clean page because as we go through our units in reading and we add more types of figurative language to it, I'd like for you to have it all on one page. So if you'll use a clean page in your reading notebook, at the top, write figurative language, and that is language used to help the reader visualize, so either to see something clearer in their mind or to relate better to the emotions of a character. Maybe the author wants you to understand a little bit better how they're feeling, so they give you these clues with the figurative language to help you feel it or see it better. And then I'd like for you to add underneath that our first figurative language that we're focusing on, which is similes. And it almost looks like the word smiles, doesn't it? Comparing two things that are unlike, using the words like or as. So the words like or as are your big clues that it's a simile. So pause here, jot these down in your notebook, and then push play to move on with me to our story. So we're going to be looking at Snow White Meets the Huntsman for this lesson this morning because there are lots and lots and lots of similes in here. If you're looking on your book on page 1, you'll remember that we talked about this simile that they're labeling here, which is the first thing that the queen talks about as she's wishing for a daughter. She says, if only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood in this frame. So we hear the word as, that's our trigger, it's a simile, and we know that the girl's not going to be as white as snow, okay? We have all kinds of beautiful different colors of skin. Very few people are anywhere close to white as snow, but that's how white she's helping us to visualize that she wants her. As red as blood, and as black as the wood in this frame. Now, I don't know about you. When I first read that, I was a little confused. I was like, how is she going to be as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as wood? Like, I'm confused. That's 3 different colors that are very different. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. But right now, if you will just make sure you've highlighted that, you should have already from our video the other day, but if not, do that now. That's the first simile we're going to add to our chart in a moment. And there it is. As a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood in this frame. Now we're going to look at these 2 paragraphs. It's paragraph 16 and paragraph 20, and those are on page 8 and then again on page 9. So if you want to flip your book to page 8 and page 9. In paragraph 16 it says, "The queen took fright and turned yellow and green with envy. From that hour on, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart turned over inside her body. So great was her hatred for the girl. The envy and pride grew ever greater, like a weed in her heart, until she had no peace and a day." And if you recall, we talked about this, my small group did. I don't know about Miss Corbin's kids. We talked about this yesterday when we read, and we even highlighted. So if you haven't highlighted, make sure you're on page 8, and you highlight that last part. The envy and pride grew even greater, like a weed in her heart, until she had no peace, day and night. There's a lot of figurative language in that paragraph, but since we're just focusing on similes, I'll try to stay focused. And we're going to add that one to our chart. Okay, the envy and pride grew ever greater, like a weed in her heart. And then we have paragraph 20. So remember, we're listening. Listen for the word like or as, and when you hear it, I want you to try to recognize it on your own. He thought, "The wild animals will soon devour you anyway," but still it was as if a stone had fallen from his heart, for he would not have to kill her. So do we hear that? But still it was as if a stone had fallen from his heart. Okay? So I'm going to add that one to the chart. Let me move my blocker here. Okay, so now we have our 3 similes from the 3 different paragraphs. And right now you're just following along, okay? So when we look at the first simile, a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood in this frame, we're comparing the child, move my face, we're comparing the child to the color of snow, the color of blood, and the color of the wood frame. Those are the 2 things that we are comparing. Okay, and the author does this. The meaning behind that, the reason she did that or he did that, is because they want us to be able to imagine, visualize the color of the child's skin. The skin is white as snow, her lips red as blood, and her hair black as ebony. Now, I hope you're all having that moment. You're like, oh yeah, Snow White. Snow White was very pale white, beautiful red lips, and that jet black hair, right? Now you see her. The next one is the envy and pride grew ever greater, like a weed in her heart. So we're comparing the feeling of envy and pride to a weed. Okay? And I know my kids, we talked about this yesterday. We talked about weeds. My husband and I were just talking about weeds yesterday in our yard because we were like, we almost don't have to cut the grass anymore, except for those weeds. We still have some weeds in our grass, and those weeds are this tall, and the grass is this tall. So weeds grow fast, weeds grow tall, and weeds are hard to kill. Okay? So as we begin to compare those feelings, and we talked about the word envy, and in this case, pride being a boastful pride, which is a negative. Those are both negative connotation, negative feelings. Not so nice words. We can understand that the author wants us to understand that the queen's jealousy grows fast and crowds out the better feelings. So weeds also grow fast, and they'll take over your grass. And so that they're growing more than the grass is growing. Okay, so it's that idea that they want us to visualize how badly she's feeling about Snow White. And then our last simile says, but still it was as if a stone had fallen from his heart, for he would not have to kill her. So in this one, we're comparing the dread, okay, the feelings. So right here, we can't actually highlight the comparison because it's a feeling, but we're comparing it to a stone falling, okay, that feeling. Now, I think probably, unfortunately, we probably all have experienced something in our life where we have felt so sick to our stomach and our heart hurts. It might be losing a loved one. It might be knowing you've done something wrong and the consequence might get you in trouble with your parents, and you kind of dread going home because mom and daddy might be waiting on you and some punishment might be coming. But I think we've all felt that heavy feeling on our heart where we're just sad and we're just down. And that's exactly what the author wanted to create for us. They wanted to create that relief of not having to kill her, but then also he talks about the relief of saying, well, I'm just going to let her go. Knowing in his mind, he's thinking it still saves him from the queen's consequences because he thinks that she'll die anyways, right? So just that feeling of dread, that feeling of sadness and like, oh gosh, I don't want to, or I'm so scared or nervous. I'm sad, real sad. So to wrap this back up and think about what we've talked about today, figurative language, language that allows the reader to better visualize, so have a picture in their mind. Remember Snow White's beautiful white skin, red lips, black hair, so vibrant in color that it's not even really humanistic, right? We don't even see people today with those colors naturally. And then the specific figurative language of a simile. So comparing two things that are unlike using the word like or as. And I would love if you would come to class today, maybe with a simile of your own that you'd like to share. Maybe one you've used if you wanted to Google a simile. Maybe there's, I'm trying to think, probably in the story there's more if you have time. I don't know if you'll have time to look for one. But coming to class to share a simile or to talk about that a little bit more, and then we're going to move into comparing fables and fairy tales, the ones we've read this week. So we'll see you guys in a little bit, and thank you so much for joining me this morning. I was very happy to see that almost everybody came yesterday and watched their video for reading. That was awesome. See you guys. Happy Friday.